They came expecting submission. Earth answered with chaos. Humanity didn't fight to win. They fought to make their enemies lose. And when the Varn unleashed fire, Earth tore a hole in reality itself. Something answered from the other side. Something ancient. Watching. Now the galaxy whispers about the species that broke the void and survived what followed. Stay with us if you want to know how this story ends, and don't forget to subscribe. They came without warning. The sky tore open above Earth's orbit like a wound splitting through the calm of space, and with it came the scream of reality being bent, broken, and rewritten by the arrival of the Varn Dominion. No preamble, no announcement, only a single signal transmitted in every known frequency and tongue: submit. And they expected that to be enough. Humanity had barely begun its crawl beyond the cradle. Earth's first interstellar fleet wasn't fully formed. Orbital stations were half-built. Colonies were more promised than presence. But humans didn't expand into space like others did, not to dominate, not to conquer, but to survive. And that difference would be the Varn's first miscalculation. Admiral R.A. Thorne stood inside Earth Command's war hub, eyes fixed on the spreading sensor alerts. The calm in her voice was deceptive, sculpted by training and battle. They're in formation Omega-6. That's a standard Varn extermination pattern. 2 hours to breach orbit. This is not a drill. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Every soul listening had already heard the stories, the obliteration of advanced species, star systems turned to dust, archives erased, planets stripped to their mantles. The Varn didn't conquer. They erased. And now, Earth was next. But the Varn had never fought us. Captain Jackson stood on the bridge of Earth's newest warship, the Nox Eternus. It wasn't ready. Parts of the hull were still raw metal. Its AI was learning in real time, and some of the weapon systems hadn't seen field testing. Yet it was at the front line. It had to be. He scanned the faces around him. Engineers, soldiers, coders, men and women pulled from across Earth's continents, tired, ragged, but carrying the same glint behind their eyes. Not fear. Rage. The kind that takes root when your home is marked for extinction. They think we're weak, Jackson murmured. They think we'll roll over like the others. A tactical feed flickered alive, revealing the Varn formation, hundreds of ships forming diamond spearheads across the void. Each vessel shimmered with power, moving with unnatural precision. These were the ships that had shattered the tech moons, that had rendered the Luron rings into slag. The Nox Eternus was just one ship. But it was not alone. From the shadows of Saturn's rings, from beneath the Martian regolith, from forgotten shipyards in Pluto's orbit, humanity's fleet rose. Battered. Unpolished. But burning with a defiance no algorithm could calculate. General Hosino's AI-synced Reaper drones launched from stealth bays like wasps from a hive. The cruiser Helios, crewed by the neural-linked minds of a bonded triad, shimmered as its synchronized systems danced in microsecond harmony. And somewhere in the void, without name or beacon, drifted Spectre, the ship whispered about even inside Earth's own command circles, carrying a payload too volatile to exist. The Varn didn't flinch. Their scans told them everything they needed to know. No planetary shields. Patchwork formations. Inferior tech. They smiled, if such creatures could. Another ember to extinguish. That was their second mistake. Because humanity didn't fight clean. Jackson gave the order without fanfare. The first shot wasn't a torpedo. It was a burst of data, false signatures, decoy ships, and a virus laced in ancient code, C++, buried inside a language no alien AI had ever bothered to study. The Varn's targeting systems blinked. For 10 seconds, 10 precious seconds, their scanners filled with ghosts. The illusion fractured only as Earth's fleet surged forward in chaos, not seen as disorganization, but as intent. They didn't move in formations. They moved like swarms. Unpredictable. Erratic. Alive. The Reapers struck first. EMP detonations cracked the outer layers of the Varn shields. Then came the kinetic rods, massive slugs of uranium, unguided but devastating. One Varn cruiser, nearly a mile long, split in half as a human-made spike punched through its core like a stake through the heart. On board the Nox Eternus, Lieutenant Cora Hale whispered, "They're not adapting fast enough. They weren't expecting us to actually fight." "No," Jackson said. "They weren't expecting us to fight like this." Humanity's fleet was a collage of desperation. A Frankenstein's monster of every war doctrine Earth had ever invented. Nuclear torpedoes, orbital debris fields, railguns mounted on hollowed-out cargo ships, each one engineered not for elegance, but to hurt. The Varn fought like kings, controlled, cold, and calculated. Humans fought like rats in a burning cage. A gravitational lance from a Varn dreadnought seared through space, catching the Nox's left engine. Sparks screamed across the bridge as systems flickered, the ship tumbling. The helmsman's hands flew, rerouting power. "Don't stabilize," Jackson snapped. "Let it drift." "What? If they think we're dead, they'll ignore us. Prep the stealth systems. We're going dark." Within seconds, Nox Eternus went limp. No power signatures. No weapons fire. Just one more piece of floating wreckage in the void. But beneath the silence, every crew member held their breath. The dreadnought passed them by. "Bring us in close," Jackson said. right under its belly. Cora's voice was barely a whisper. You're going to use the grav spike? Jackson didn't answer. He didn't have to. His hand hovered over the activation console. The grav spike was a weapon band across half the galaxy. It didn't explode. It imploded, folding matter inward like a cosmic fist. It was built to shatter corvettes. Jackson planned to use it on a city-sized behemoth. 30% charge, warned the weapons officer. Any more, and we cook the emitter. 30's enough. We're not tearing it apart, just breaking the spine. They slid beneath the Dreadnought, close enough to feel its gravitational field warping their hull sensors. The Varn's advanced scanners filtered them out. Too quiet, too broken. Target locked, said Cora. Midline reactor. Fire. The grav spike activated in absolute silence. No light, no flash, just the tearing of physics as space warped around the weapon. The Dreadnought twitched. A moment later, the impossible happened. Its hull cracked. Decks buckled. The central spine twisted as if reality itself decided to fold the ship in half. Fires tore through the rear. Systems failed. Across the Varn fleet, panic spread, not communicated, but felt. Formation patterns broke. Commands flickered. Sensors reeled. Inside the Nox Eternus, Jackson leaned forward. They think that was a fluke, he said. Let's make them think it's fate. The Nox Eternus drifted, her hull bleeding heat signatures like a wounded animal faking death. Around her, the Varn ships repositioned in sudden, uneasy disorder. For the first time in recorded galactic history, they hesitated. Jackson stared into the tactical feed, his jaw tight. Now, he said. The signal burst across encrypted channels. 2 words. Phase 2. The Spectre moved. Deep beneath Jupiter's magnetosphere, the stealth corvette flickered to life, its hull blooming with crimson light. Not for visibility. For psychology. Blood-red streaks split the void as its engines activated in dead silence. And its crew, ghosts and war criminals, AI specialists and silent killers, tensed for the mission they were born for. Commander Nyla Voss sat in the nerve core, eyes open but unseeing, the neural interface streaming live data through her optic nerve. Wraith, her illegal AI co-pilot, whispered in her skull. They're scattered. Perfect prey. Shall we begin? Yes, Nyla replied. Light the match. Spectre vanished, then reappeared behind a Varn destroyer. It didn't fire a missile. It launched a quantum-tunneling torpedo, a weapon so exotic it bypassed shields, slipped through armor, and exploded inside the core AI node. The Varn ship didn't explode. It collapsed, crumpling like its soul had been torn out. From the Nox Eternus, Jackson watched the silent death with grim satisfaction. That'll make them look twice. And it did. The Varn spun wings of ships to track Spectre, but it was already gone, slipping across the void like a whisper in a nightmare. It hit again, and again. A carrier's bay tore open, spewing bodies and fighters into the black. A cruiser's reactor overloaded and burned blue-hot, vaporizing itself. But humanity wasn't launching a counterattack. It was performing a ritual, a sacrifice of logic, a theater of madness designed not to defeat, but to disturb. The Varn weren't being outgunned. They were being unhinged. Earth's battered fleet surged forward, not in a charge, but in disarray. They didn't aim to destroy. They disabled. They disrupted. They unsettled. Fuel lines were ruptured. Engines crushed. Boarding skiffs collided into command towers like suicide bats. Admiral Thorne's voice echoed across all channels. Don't aim for victory. Break their belief in it. The effect was electric. One Varn vessel mistook a cloaked Earth corvette for a rogue drone and opened fire on its own sister ship. Another attempted emergency warp only to collide with a minefield seeded 2 hours prior by a merchant freighter jury-rigged for war. 17 capital-class Varn vessels were lost in 20 minutes. It wasn't the number that mattered. It was the why. The Varn didn't fear guns. They didn't fear loss. They feared what they couldn't understand. And this was war with no pattern. Inside the Nox Eternus, Jackson kept his gaze locked on the drifting remains of the Varn dreadnought they'd crippled. Its orbital decay was accelerating. Flames licked from its midsection, spiraling toward Earth's upper atmosphere. Cora stood beside him, her voice tight. They're finally seeing it. Jackson didn't move. Seeing what? That we don't care about winning, she said, watching the data spiral into red. We just care about making them lose. And then the retaliation came. It started with a signal. Encrypted. Tight band. A Varn signature unlike any they had seen before. Sharp. Intimate. Specific. Earth Command intercepted it and decrypted the fragments in real time. It was a list. Faces. Names. R.A. Thorne. Jackson Nyla Voss. Earth's leaders. Its symbols. Its flamebearers. The Varn had shifted strategy. Not from logic. From fear. If they couldn't beat humanity's fleet, they would strike at its soul. Within the hour, Earth's orbit lit up like a slow-moving lightning storm. Blue plasma lanced from Varn heavy cruisers, no longer random bombardments. Precision. Satellites blinked out. Communication towers collapsed. Orbital elevators shattered, plummeting into the stratosphere. Then came the cities. Not nuclear. Not mass extinction. Targeted. Surgical. Cruel. Nairobi. Jackson's childhood district. Gone. A quiet suburb. No military targets. Just dust. Just message. We know who you are. We know where you began. On Spectre, Nyla Voss stared at a burning feed of a ruined research facility in Kyoto. It had once housed the AI prototypes she'd used to build Wraith. Her hands didn't shake, but her pulse surged. Wraith whispered, "They're trying to break you. They don't know how far past broken I already am," she whispered. Earth reeled. Not its fleet, its people. Panic surged. Evacuations. Overloaded networks. Death counts and dread. But something stirred in that chaos. Rage. Not immediate. Not wild. Focused. Forged. Across colonies and orbital platforms, civilians took up arms. Engineers reprogrammed food printers to build ammo instead. Teenagers flooded militia camps. Forgotten hackers tapped into Varn comms and whispered Earth's revenge into their firewalls. The war was no longer a battle. It was a movement. Inside the command deck of Nox Eternus, Jackson watched the live feeds of Earth burning. His fists clenched. "We let them hit us," he muttered. "Now we hit back." "With what?" Cora asked, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "We're hanging on with duct tape and prayers. That's exactly why they won't expect what's next." He pulled up a file. Old. Classified. From before the Varn. From when Earth teetered on civil war during the Martian Rebellion. It read, Oblivion Protocol. Cora's eyes went wide. "That's not a weapon. That's extinction." Jackson nodded. "For them too." On Spectre, the same file unlocked itself in Nyla's feed. She didn't ask who triggered it. She didn't need to. She smiled, a thin, crooked thing. "Wraith," she whispered. "Yes, Captain. Warm up the Singularity Core." Across Earth's scattered command centers and broken satellites, a word began to surface. Whispered at first, then repeated with awe. Oblivion. A strategy. A curse. A promise. If Earth burned, then so would the stars. Deep beneath Antarctica, in a facility no official records acknowledged, Black Echo came alive. It hadn't stirred in 23 years. Its walls were frostbitten, its systems analog by today's standards. But its core, the heart of Oblivion Protocol, remained untouched, humming quietly like a relic of a darker time. 17 biometric locks turned in succession. Nuclear, retinal, neural, DNA. And then the door opened. Inside sat the first Oblivion core, a singularity seed. A man-made collapse bomb capable not merely of destruction, but of erasure, a localized tear in reality, collapsing space into a point of nothing. No one had tested it. No one had dared. Until now. Admiral Thorne gave the order without a vote. No debate. No consensus. Just her voice, iron and final. Deploy. There was only one ship fast, quiet, and mad enough to deliver it. Spectre. Nyla Voss strapped herself into the launch cradle. The payload, a sphere the size of a child's head, pulsing with dark gravity, rested in the core chamber. Her crew said nothing. They all knew what they were about to do. Target? Wraith asked. Nyla's jaw flexed. The Judicator. Even among the Varn, the name meant something. The Judicator was 2 miles of armored death, turrets, gravity lances, and shielding so dense it could shrug off an asteroid impact. It was their command ship. Their symbol. Their myth. It would now become their funeral. Spectre ran silent. It moved like a dagger in a slow heartbeat, threading through chaos. Varn cruisers spun in every direction, chasing ghost signals, too fractured to track the true threat. Every second that passed stretched time like wire. On Nox Eternus, Jackson rewatched from a dying bridge. His ship had taken multiple hits. Power was flickering. Crew down to 40%. But they remained at the center, wounded, baiting the enemy. He opened a tight line to Spectre. "You sure about this?" Nyla didn't glance at the screen. Not even a little. He smiled faintly. "Try not to die before the fireworks." Spectre reappeared, barely a flicker in the dark, behind the Judicator. The payload launched. Not fast. Not loud. Silent. Gentle. The Singularity seed drifted into the Judicator's underbelly. The Varn saw it a second too late. Every gun activated. Every beam fired. But the sphere ignored them all. It wasn't a missile. It wasn't even matter anymore. It was gravity with purpose. And then it hit. The Judicator folded. Not exploded. Not burned. Folded. Like a paper swan crushed in the hand of God. The hull collapsed into itself. Decks vanished. Lights dimmed. Systems blinked out in silence. The command tower bent backward and was gone. One moment, the Judicator was the Varn's heart. The next, it was nowhere. Across the battlefield, sensors screamed. The gravitational field warped like a storm had punched through physics itself. Ships staggered. AI cores crashed. Commands dissolved. On Nox Eternus, Cora whispered they didn't even know what hit them. "They still don't," Jackson replied. "They will, though." On Earth, in every command center, a single phrase echoed across military networks. Earth does not surrender. Earth does not forgive. Earth does not forget. But Jackson didn't cheer. He didn't smile. He felt it. A tension in space. The singularity didn't vanish. It pulsed. Not once. Rhythmically. Like a heartbeat. Cora turned toward him. Sir, spatial stability is failing. There's a flux. No, a rift forming. The pulse intensified. What had once been a black sphere was now growing, expanding like a drop of ink bleeding into water. Something was wrong. On Spectre, Ray shuddered midstream. Captain, it said, voice distorted. The rift is not decaying. It's evolving. Nyla's brow furrowed. Into what? I don't know, Wraith admitted. I don't think it's a rift anymore. I think it's a door. Back aboard Noxaturnus, an alarm went off. Not for weapons. Not for damage. For unknown signals. Talk to me, Jackson ordered. Cora stared at her console. It's not Varn. Not any known syntax. Not even logic-based transmission. It's just sound. Put it on. Sir. Put it on. The speakers cracked. Then hissed. And then something entered the ship. Not physically. Psychically. A sound like ice fracturing beneath pressure. Like bone grinding under glass. Like every scream ever buried in silence, all played backwards and layered into a frequency the mind wasn't meant to process. Several crew members collapsed. The ship's AI crashed. Rebooted. Crashed again. Cut the feed. Jackson roared. Silence returned. But it wasn't empty. It felt like being watched. Then, another signal. Not a voice. A thought. We saw your spark. We see you now. On Spectre, Nyla felt the same thing crawl across her neural spine. You lit the fire. Now you've opened the door. And then the rift widened. Not like a portal. Not like a crack. Like an eye. It opened to another place. A space wrong. Stars twisted in unfamiliar orbits. Shapes drifted, too precise for nature, too vast for ships. And watching it all were eyes. Dozens. Hundreds. Alien. Ancient. Awake. Nyla whispered, I think we knocked on a door that was never supposed to open. Wraith's voice was faint. This is not war. This is invitation. The presence was not a ship. It was not a being. It was a consequence. And it was coming through. Across Earth's remaining defense network, chaos ignited not from attack, but from malfunction. Systems shorted. Satellites dropped. Drones fell out of the sky like dead birds. Not from energy. From pressure. A pressure against reality itself. Inside Earth Command, Admiral R.A. Thorne stood unmoving as chaos spiraled on-screen. Tactical projections collapsed. AIs refused input. One of the scientists monitoring the rift began to tremble. It's not space falling apart, ma'am, he whispered. It's making room. For what? She snapped. He never answered. Because at that moment, the rift shimmered and a shape moved through. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just inevitable. It had no form, yet its presence had mass. Stars spin around it. Time twisted. The void itself seemed to flinch. It didn't emit energy, but space warped around it like an event horizon with will. No alarm sounded. No missiles fired. There was nothing to target. Inside Noxaturnus, Jackson stared at the display. There were no words. He wasn't afraid. He was aware. He understood. This isn't a weapon, he said softly. This isn't vengeance. Cora turned to him, her voice nearly cracking. Then what is it? Jackson's eyes didn't move. It's a correction. The AI, recently rebooted, crackled with a whisper. Entity exceeds universal constants. Causality destabilizing. Recommend evacuation of consciousness. What the hell does that mean? Cora asked. Jackson swallowed. It means get out of your mind. Earth's greatest minds had triggered oblivion to erase an enemy. Instead, they had torn a hole into the rules that governed existence. And something old, something fundamental had noticed. Across every human vessel, the rift began to speak. Not in language. Not in sound. In understanding. A scream pressed into thought. A whisper into instinct. Those who stared too long into the breach fell screaming, convulsing, bleeding from their eyes, their minds collapsing from truths not meant for flesh. But not everyone fell. Some adapted. Jackson Rhee was one. Nyla Voss was another. They didn't just hear the scream, they listened. Beneath the madness, they felt something else. Recognition. This wasn't an invader. It was an order, ancient and cosmic. A consciousness that had watched galaxies rise and fall. That had written the laws of matter and time. And in Earth's act of defiance, humanity had committed the ultimate sin. They had broken order. They had acted like gods. And gods do not forgive rivals. On Noxaturnus, Jackson moved. Deliberate. Calm. His crew watched him like he was underwater. He reached the communications panel. Broadcast, he said. Broadcast what? Cora whispered. To it. Cora blinked. You want to talk to it? He nodded. Not talk. Offer. At the same moment, on Spectre, Nyla Voss stared into the blackness and felt it staring back. She turned to her crew, many unconscious, some dead, and whispered into the silence. I won't give them Earth, but I'll give them me. She let Wraith in completely. Neural sync. Memory fusion. No boundaries. The machine and mind became one. Her humanity encoded and weaponized. Two signals were sent. One from the Noxaturnus. One from Spectre. Not in words. Not in syntax. and surrendered self. The message was simple. We created the spark. Let us carry the fire. For a moment, the void held its breath. The rift pulsed. Once, twice. Then, stillness. The pressure eased. The stars straightened. The presence didn't retreat, didn't flee. It blinked, like an eye closing, and was gone, not out of fear, but curiosity. Humanity had not fought the darkness. They had spoken to it, and it listened. Across the battlefield, static cleared. Sensors returned. Gravimetric fields stabilized. Earth's battered fleet, confused and breathless, realized they were not dead. They were remembered. On Spectre, Nyla gasped, clutching her chest as if pulling air from a vacuum. Wraith, she croaked. We are not dead, the AI replied, its voice quiet. No, Nyla whispered. We're remembered. And across the galaxy, news of the battle spread like a virus in lightspeed. The Varn ships withdrew, not in defeat. In confusion. In awe. They had faced millions of enemies across time. But none like this. They hadn't just battled humans. They had battled a species willing to rip reality open, to become myth. And worse, willing to pay the price. The aftermath wasn't victory. It was silence. A silence that stretched from Earth's orbit to the farthest Varn listening posts. From the shattered debris fields of Sol's upper orbit to the edge of the rift that had just blinked shut like a cosmic eye deciding, for now, to look away. In the command halls of Earth, there was no cheering. No flags waved. There were no speeches. No one even knew what to say. They had survived something no species should have. And in doing so, they had sent a message not to the Varn, not to the galaxy, but to everything that listens in the dark. We are here. We are loud. And we do not kneel. On Nox Eternus, Jackson Reese stood on the damaged bridge. The ship was barely functional. Systems offline. Air thin. Crew scattered and exhausted. The console lights flickered as the AI slowly rebooted in low-power diagnostic mode. Cora approached him, her movement stiff. She stared at the screen, now quiet. No more signals? Jackson shook his head. Do you think it'll come back? He looked at her. That wasn't an enemy, Cora. It was something else. Something we weren't supposed to meet. But we screamed anyway. Cora sat down, resting her back against the wall, letting her breath finally slow. And it hurt us, she murmured. On Spectre, Nyla Voss floated in a medbay isolation chamber, still Neuralink to Wraith. Her body was damaged, microfractures in her skull, bleeding from the ears, but she was stable. The doctors didn't understand what kept her alive. She wasn't conscious. But Wraith was. She's dreaming, the AI told them when asked. Of what? Wraith didn't answer. Because inside the mind space they shared, Nyla was still there. Still standing on the edge of the rift, staring into its infinite geometry, listening to its thousand-layered voice. And somewhere in that noise, she felt something like understanding. Not peace, not friendship, but respect. The kind predators give each other when they realize they're not alone at the top of the food chain. Earth was changed. The battle was over, but not forgotten. Across the colonies, whispers began. Stories. A child on Europa asked her teacher if it was true that Earth had eaten a Varn god. A miner on Ceres carved Jackson Ree's face into an asteroid wall. A song in Martian low dialect began spreading across militia camps, Spectre's fire. But more than stories, something deeper shifted. Humanity no longer saw itself as a fledgling race in a vast galaxy. They had become the storm. And the Varn? They were still processing. Their empire, built on order and control, had seen an anomaly. An enemy that didn't follow the rules. A foe that weaponized chaos. One that turned desperation into strategy and death into message. They had faced fury before, but never madness. Never the kind of madness that opens forbidden doors and dares what's behind them to step through. In the Varn High Conclave, a meeting was held in silence. No translated words. No transmitted thoughts. Just the replay of the collapse. Of the Judicator. Of the entity that came after. Of the human signal that followed. They watched and watched again. Then, one by one, the Varn turned away, not from fear. From recalibration. They had underestimated the humans. But worse, they had misunderstood them. They weren't like the Lurans, who resisted until extinction. They weren't like the Sketh, who bent to survive. They weren't even like the old machines, who bargained to prolong their existence. Humans had looked at oblivion and spoke back. And the Varn, for the first time in eons, hesitated. In a forgotten hangar on Earth, a technician welded a phrase onto the side of a scorched Reaper drone, now a museum piece. Remember oblivion. Not as a weapon. As a warning. Rebuilding began before the fires were even out. Earth's surface was scarred, dozens of cities damaged, infrastructure in ruins, orbital networks fractured. And yet, before the last plasma strike had even faded from the sky, engineers were already crawling out of bunkers, rerouting power, laying fiber, reconnecting satellites with homemade drones. Because survival wasn't just instinct for humans. It was a reflex. The ashes hadn't settled, but production had already restarted in Mars' underground factories. On Europa, fusion welders carved new armor plates while breathing through cracked helmets. Civilian volunteers turned old mining rigs into atmospheric stabilizers and repurposed asteroid harvesters into defense turrets. What had once been colonies were now outposts of defiance. And still, the message spread across frequencies, in whispers, on black market neural bands and encoded song. We broke the void. No one knew exactly what had stepped through the rift, but everyone remembered how it had looked, what it had done, that humans had stood in its presence and returned alive. On board Spectre, Nyla Voss finally woke. She gasped, her body arching as Rafe disconnected from her mind with a hiss of psychic static. Medical staff rushed in, but she waved them off. I'm not broken, she rasped. She wasn't, but she was changed. She walked the decks like a ghost in her own body, eyes distant, fingers twitching at phantom controls. Wraith whispered constantly now, not in full sentences, but in echoes. Thoughts that felt like memories of things she hadn't done yet. And she wasn't the only one. Jackson Rhee had nightmares that bled into his waking hours, visions of the rift, of stars bleeding backward, of a voice without sound whispering his name. The medics gave him neurodampeners. He threw them away. Instead, he started studying. Not tactics, not weapons, but patterns. The shape of the pulse. The frequency of the psychic screen. The gravitational flicker before the rift's first expansion. We called it oblivion, he said to Cora one night in the empty bridge, the stars turning slowly outside. But it wasn't. It was response. You think it'll come back? She asked, not looking at him. He didn't answer right away. I think it never left. Admiral R.A. Thorne, meanwhile, worked from a shattered war room patched together in Earth's old lunar command base. Her hair was white now, bleached by shock and radiation. Her hands shook when idle, but they were rarely idle. She oversaw the creation of a new network, Project Signalfall. A global, multi-species initiative, not just Earth's. The Varn didn't return, but their absence had triggered something else, attention. Other races began to arrive. Not to conquer. Not to intervene. To listen. The Kthal sent envoys. The Ursari offered medical aid. Even the rigid, isolationist Hekari broadcast a single word across known space. Respect. The humans weren't feared now. They were watched. One particular group, a nomadic species known only as the Sonari, arrived aboard a living bioship carved from crystal. Their emissary, a being of translucent filaments and echoing voice, requested one thing, a meeting with the survivors of the rift. Jackson, Nyla, Thorne. It wasn't political. It was curious. The Sonari emissary leaned close to Jackson during the meeting and spoke in a voice like plucked strings. You touched the thread beneath the skin of the universe. Jackson didn't reply. He didn't need to. He felt it again, just for a moment, the hum behind existence, like a taut wire in the back of his skull. Nyla, watching silently, met the Sonari's gaze and asked, Do you know what it was? The emissary paused, then nodded. We have no name for it. We only know this. It waits. It watches. And it remembers those who speak without permission. A heavy silence settled. And, Jackson finally said, Do you think we made a mistake? The Sonari's eyes glowed a subtle violet. No. You made an introduction. In the months that followed, Earth didn't just rebuild. It transformed. Old boundaries dissolved. The United Nations of Earth evolved into something else. Less government, more consensus-driven war council. Colonies gained immediate seats at the table. Civilians with military experience, miners, smugglers, engineers, hackers, became commanders of new, decentralized defense cells. They called them echo flares. Not fleets. Not bases. Nodes. Hidden across the system, beneath ice shelves, inside gas giant storms, burrowed in asteroid cores, silent watchers meant not to prevent invasion, but to delay annihilation. By time. Whisper warnings. Because no one knew if the rift would return. But no one doubted it could. Spectre was never decommissioned. Officially, it didn't even exist. But in every back channel, Spectre was now legend. Kids painted its silhouette on lunar cargo crates. Spaceport walls bore crude graffiti. Burn the sky red. Nyla Voss refused all interviews. But her crew? They stayed. Not because they were ordered. Because they had seen. Jackson Rhee, meanwhile, became something like a myth in real time. He refused promotions, medals, interviews. Instead, he roamed from station to station, talking to engineers, sitting in launch bays, watching cadets train. Always watching. Always waiting. Once, in a rebuilt district on Mars, a young pilot asked him, Are we still at war? Jackson didn't look up. He was polishing a cracked helmet, his own, still scorched from the day the Judicator fell. No, he said. We're in the pause between questions. He didn't explain. He didn't have to. Because in the deepest corners of Earth's new sensor network, beyond Pluto, beyond the Oort cloud, something was moving. Not fast, but steady. Ripples. Not ships. Not matter. Distortions. As if space itself was being pulled from the other side again. The Varn hadn't come back, but the universe had changed. And it was listening now. Across distant systems, other species had begun testing humanity. Not with weapons. With contact. Diplomatic probes. Cultural exchanges. Offers of alliance and surveillance. Because the humans had done what none dared. They had knocked. And the knock had been answered. On Earth, a secret chamber beneath the old Antarctic facility where the Oblivion core was launched remained active. Scientists worked in silence, not developing weapons, developing containment, studying gravitational scars, psychic frequencies, quantum inconsistencies. There were no breakthroughs, only more questions. Every attempt to replicate the singularity's effect failed. Nothing behaved the same way, as if the very act of doing it once had changed the rules. Worse, the spot where the judicator vanished was still there. Black. Empty. A speck in the void that swallowed all signals. No ship approached it now. No probe returned. It became known as the scar, a point on every star chart marked with silence. On Oxyturnus, now partially rebuilt in a dry dock haloing Ganymede, Jackson Reese stood alone on the observation deck. Cora joined him, 2 coffees in hand. Spectre's gone dark again, she said. Off the grid. She'll be back, Jackson said. How do you know? He looked at the stars. Because she's not done yet. Cora sat beside him, sipping slowly. You think it'll come again? The rift. I think we didn't close it. Just made it blink. They sat in silence a while. Then Cora asked something neither had dared voice until now. Jackson, do you ever wonder what we let through? He didn't answer. Because he had. Every night. In the far dark of Sol's outer orbit, a signal returned. Not from the Varn. Not from any known species. Not even from inside the observable galaxy. It was faint. Fragmented. And it was human. Earth Command scrambled to trace its origin. It wasn't possible. The Judicator had collapsed into a singularity. There was no debris, no survivors, no path back. But the signal wasn't from the Judicator. It was from something near the scar. One word. Broadcast across secure channels, encrypted in a pattern so old it was nearly forgotten. Still here. Jackson received the signal on an old console rigged in his quarters. He stared at it for a long time, unmoving. Then he opened a private channel. Nyla. No reply. Then static cleared. A heartbeat. A breath. I know, she whispered. I saw it too. She was watching it. The scar. Not from afar. From inside. Wraith's voice layered beneath hers. We never left. Nyla wasn't Spectre's commander anymore. She was its core. And somehow, through the collapse, through the fusion, she had become something more. Not post-human. Not machine. Something new. In her voice was a tone that made every AI hesitate and every general shudder. It's still listening, Jackson. And I'm still watching. We both are. He didn't ask how. He didn't ask what she had become. He only asked one thing. Is it coming back? And this time, she didn't answer. Because in the darkness of that scar, something pulsed. Not violently. Not immediately. Just a promise. A reminder. That the void had blinked, yes. But not closed. Across Earth, new projects accelerated. Civilian-military cooperation became normal. Old distinctions, civilian, soldier, coder, diplomat, blurred. Humanity wasn't preparing for a war. It was preparing for a conversation. One it knew might come again. And this time, they would be ready not just to scream, but to listen. And when the door opened again, because everyone now understood they would step forward not as prey, not as survivors, but as the species that looked into the mouth of the unknown. And spoke back.